Yeah. Aubrey, a lot of your work has been on behaviour genetics, and it's a very fascinating subject. I often feel that people get confused about behaviour genetics and behaviour development. I mean, are they right to do so? And obviously it's not right to get confused, but I mean, do you see a clear distinction between genetics and development that some people miss?
I mean, there are numerous problems here. I've been struck. My wife's a child psychotherapist, having done a PhD in ethology, really. Well, not really, she did a PhD in ethology, so she's that science background. And I've been fascinated and really rather alarmed to discover amongst quite a few of her extremely clever colleagues, they mix up, they use the term evolution in a very loose kind of way, and they don't make much distinction between phylogeny and ontogeny development.
Yeah,
they really don't. They talk about, of course, the Journal of Genetic Psychology, I don't know whether it still exists, is about development.
Yeah.
And there is there's a considerable confusion. We must keep them, we must try to separate what information there will be there in the genotype from the way in which that gets expressed during the animal's development, which is a matter of infinite subtlety. And I always wince when people talk about a gene for aggression or genes for aggression, because that really makes it seem utterly fatalistic. You've got this gene, you're aggressive, just like that. Whereas we know that nothing, I was always going to use that old phrase, nothing is written, I mean, there are predispositions which there may be more or great or less difficulty in overcoming, but there's always the ontogeny to link with the way the animal is moving.
I mean, when you think about what geneticists actually study, it's always individual differences, and so a gene for aggression could only ever mean a gene that, all other things being equal, makes a difference between this individual being aggressive and that individual not. And that's what geneticists study. They study individual differences. Fortunately, natural selection studies individual differences too. And so natural selection, by choosing phenotypic differences in, say, aggression, will automatically have the effect of choosing this gene rather than that gene on a sort of statistical basis. But that's terribly different from saying, if you've got a gene for X, you're inevitably bound to have X.
And that particular aspect of behaviour, aggression, of course, caused infinite trouble, didn't it? I mean, there was Lawrence's very extreme views in that book on aggression, which had a good deal of biological sense in it, but I mean, the way in which he approached it was very much a fatalistic thing. And then, what was the name of the guy? Robert Ardrey, wasn't it? Territorial imperative, the idea that we were evolved as aggressors, we're born as aggressors, and I mean, it flies in the face of facts. I always remember there was I think a Finnish woman who selected for high aggressive and low aggressive lines of mice. And given the same kind of upbringing, it was quite striking. I mean, the aggressive mice would fly at another individual the instant it appeared, whereas the others would shrink away and so on. But with just a little bit of environmental difference, you could turn the aggressive ones into abject cowards. And make the others aggressive, entirely by the way that you read them.
It's not a very difficult point to grasp, is it?
Absolutely not. No. You would think not, but it still kicks around, doesn't it?
Is it possible to say what Nico's left you? I mean, not just in ethology, but other. I mean, I know you've moved on to all sorts of other interests. Has Nico kind of fed into that at all?
I think I'm sure we'd all agree that he was a superb naturalist, and to be out in the natural world with him was a wonderful kind of inspiration, really. I can remember 1 or 2 days when he was starting me off on my project. He would take me up into Whiteham, and he would give a kind of running commentary on the world, and he really saw, I think the cliche now is the web of life, which is a much overused term perhaps, but it's there nonetheless. I think and I'm sure you, had a love of the natural world before we became students of Tinbergen. I mean, I got into biology through being a fanatical bird watcher, moving into the country and becoming a bird watcher, and then getting fascinated by insects and so on. And that's never left me. I mean, Nico showed how you could do good science, yet nonetheless work with animals in their own environment, and furthermore not just see the beauty of it really, but the excitement, the emotional response which you have, because I think science is, too few people recognise that science is a human activity which involves emotions, creativity, despair, and all of those things.
Yes, we murder to dissect. I mean, we're seen as though we are inhuman, cold.
It's crazy,
yes,
isn't it?
Yeah.
It is really. I mean, nobody who's done science would believe that for a minute. And there are good and bad scientists, some of whom have good vibes about it, some bad vibes. There are alas, a few cheats who are faking the whole thing, but there are a small minority, and most of us get great joy out of doing science, I think, and of understanding the world. And also, as your chair and your work personify, communicating it to people, that science, I don't know what you feel, I very much like Lewis Wolpert and I admire him, but I disagree with him profoundly on one thing. He's quite often said that some science is just too complicated to explain it to people. It just is too difficult. Now, of course, if we're thinking of the detail, that's going to be right, isn't it? But the principle, what you're trying to do and why it's important, why it's exciting, I think that's possible for almost any branch of science, including recherche mathematics, which I don't understand.
Quantum physics?
Quantum physics, yes, I can even get the principle of it's the principles of it, of these. Of course, I can't explain it, but what am I asking the quantum physicists to do, to explain to us why they're excited by this, why they get into the uniqueness of this world.
They can do that.
All of those things.
Yes. With some of the weirdness of it, the sort of quanta.
No,
going through.
I could. No, I think there probably are relatively few people who can talk at that kind of level.
Yes.
But I'm not quite sure that's. I think Lewis was thinking a little more broadly than that, and thinking that some sort. I mean, but it can be complicated, and you do need some background to make a good judgment. But I mean, a topic that might seem to be molecular biology, very molecular genetics, very recherche subject, but the principles are very simple, actually.
I like to think that there shouldn't be that great a separation between the way we write for our colleagues in our own narrow discipline and the way we write for lay people and perhaps others, between other scientists in different disciplines. I think it's a pity that a customer's grown up to think that you write one way your paper to Nature, which is pretty unintelligible to any but a tiny minority of people in the world, and then you have a News and Views, which is supposed to translate it for others. Why shouldn't you write it in an intelligible way in the first place? I can see there would be difficulties in taking that too far, but I think we don't try hard enough as scientists on the whole.
No.
To imagine writing for somebody who is not a specialist in the field.
I think that's right. I feel that those of us working in animal behaviour have had a relatively easy task in this. I mean, I always remember when teaching animal behaviour, you could be quite sure, I mean, one would say this to students, if you find my lectures difficult, that's my fault, because the subject is not only intrinsically quite straightforward, but it's also intrinsically attractive. I mean, people love animal behaviour. Think of all the films on the telly and so on. Our colleagues in particle physics do have a slightly more difficult.
It's a slightly more uphill struggle.
I mean, I always remember John Smith in his a wonderful television programme, choosing as one of his 7 wonders of the world Benham's top, I think it was.